Russia just threatened preemptive strikes against the West, but this isn't about military power. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev's warning reveals something far more dangerous for Putin's regime than any battlefield defeat. But the movement that Western nations have created strikes at the heart of Vladimir Putin's biggest fears. What's happening right now isn't just about Ukraine anymore. It's about the complete transformation of global power that could end Putin's rule forever. But what makes this moment different from every previous crisis is that the West has finally learned to coordinate in ways that Putin never anticipated, and the implications go far beyond anything we've seen before. You need to understand why Putin's inner circle is now talking about preemptive strikes, because what they're really afraid of will change everything you think you know about this conflict. On July 17, 2025, Donald Trump delivered an ultimatum that sent shockwaves through the Kremlin. The U.S. president demanded that Russia agree to peace within 50 days, threatening to impose devastating 100% tariffs on any country that continues buying Russian oil. This wasn't just another diplomatic threat. It was a direct attack on the $192 billion annual revenue stream that funds Putin's war machine. But what made this ultimatum truly terrifying for Moscow was its precision. Trump wasn't targeting Russia directly. He was targeting China and India, the two economic giants that have kept Russia's economy afloat by purchasing over 7 million barrels of Russian oil daily. But the real shock came when Putin's inner circle realized that this wasn't an empty threat. The West had finally learned to weaponize economic interdependence in ways that could cripple Russia without firing a single shot. The fact that Trump could credibly threaten to disrupt global energy markets revealed a level of Western coordination that Putin had never faced before. What happened next would prove that Putin's greatest fear isn't military defeat, it's the growing unity of his enemies. Within hours of Trump's ultimatum, Dmitry Medvedev, Putin's former president and current deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, issued a response that revealed the Kremlin's true state of mind. Medvedev declared that Russia must be ready to launch preemptive strikes against the West if the conflict escalates further. According to TASS, Russia's state news agency, Medvedev specifically stated that Russia needed to respond in full and, if necessary, launch preemptive strikes against Western nations. But this wasn't the confident posturing of a winning regime. It was the desperate rhetoric of leaders who suddenly realized they were facing an existential threat. Medvedev's statement that many in the West had treachery in their blood revealed the paranoia that now grips Putin's inner circle. But what made this response particularly telling was its timing and tone. Instead of dismissing Trump's threats, the Kremlin immediately escalated to nuclear rhetoric, suggesting that Putin's advisors understand something the public doesn't. The West has finally found Russia's pressure point. The question now is whether Putin will double down on his threats or face the reality that his regime is running out of options. As Medvedev issued his threats, NATO was already demonstrating the kind of coordinated response that terrifies the Kremlin. General Alexis Grinkowicz, NATO's top military commander, announced that preparations were fully underway to deliver additional Patriot missile systems to Ukraine as quickly as possible. This wasn't just military aid, it was a masterclass in Western coordination. Germany immediately committed to purchasing additional US-made Patriot systems specifically to donate to Ukraine, while a meeting of all Patriot-owning nations was scheduled for the following week at NATO headquarters in Belgium. But the speed and precision of this response revealed something that Putin had never encountered before: a Western alliance that could adapt and respond faster than Russia could escalate. The fact that NATO could coordinate complex weapons transfers across multiple nations within days showed a level of institutional efficiency that Russia's chaotic command structure simply cannot match. But what made this moment truly dangerous for Putin was the realization that the West was no longer reactive. It had become proactive, anticipating Russian moves and countering them before they could achieve their objectives. This shift from defense to offense in Western strategy represents the kind of systematic threat that could unravel Putin's entire approach to international relations. Faced with this unprecedented Western coordination, Putin's military responded in the only way it knew how: by escalating violence against civilians. On the night of July 15th-16th, Russian forces launched one of their largest attacks of the war, sending 400 Shahed drones and decoy drones against Ukrainian cities, along with Iskander ballistic missiles targeting critical infrastructure. According to the Institute for the Study of War, this massive assault primarily targeted energy infrastructure in Kryvyi Rih, Kharkiv, and Vinnytsia, causing widespread damage to civilian and industrial facilities. But this attack revealed more about Russian weakness than strength. Despite launching 400 drones, Ukrainian air defenses shot down 198 Shahed drones, while electronic warfare systems neutralized 145 decoy drones, demonstrating that Russia's most advanced weapons were being systematically defeated by Western-supplied defense systems. But the most telling aspect of this attack was its target selection. Instead of focusing on military objectives, Russia was attacking shopping centers, hospitals, and power grids, the tactics of terrorists, not a professional military. This shift to targeting civilians revealed that Putin's Second Army of the World had been reduced to conducting terror campaigns because it could no longer achieve meaningful military victories. The fact that Russia needed to launch 400 drones to achieve limited damage against civilian targets showed just how far Russian military capabilities had degraded under Western pressure. But the most revealing moment came when European leaders announced their response to Russia's escalation. The European Commission unveiled a staggering 10 billion euros in immediate investment for Ukraine, leveraged by 2.3 billion euros in loans and grants from European institutions. This announcement made at the Ukraine Recovery Conference wasn't just about money. It was about demonstrating the one thing Putin fears most: Western resistance. President Zelensky's call for a Marshall Plan-style approach was immediately backed by concrete financial commitments that dwarfed anything Russia could offer its own allies. But the real revelation came when the European Commission proposed its 2026 budget of $2 trillion, with $100 billion specifically earmarked for Ukraine's reconstruction and EU integration. These figures revealed the mathematical impossibility of Putin's strategy. With NATO's combined GDP of $45 trillion compared to Russia's $45 trillion, compared to Russia's $2 trillion economy, Putin was essentially fighting an opponent with 22 times his own economic resources. But what made this moment truly terrifying for the Kremlin was the realization that Europe was prepared to sustain this level of support indefinitely, regardless of what happened in American politics. Putin had bet everything on Western fatigue, but instead found himself facing an adversary with unlimited resources and patience. Recognizing the existential nature of this threat, Western leaders began implementing a new strategy designed to exploit Putin's greatest vulnerability: his dependence on energy revenues and Chinese support. Trump's threat to impose 100% tariffs on countries buying Russian oil wasn't just economic warfare, it was surgical targeting of the relationships that keep Putin's regime alive. China imports nearly 20% of its oil from Russia, while India relies on Russia for 36% of its energy needs, making both countries vulnerable to American economic pressure. But the genius of this approach was its use of secondary sanctions, forcing Putin's allies to choose between access to Western markets worth tens of trillions of dollars or continued support for a regime worth $2 trillion. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte's call for China, India, and Brazil to make the phone call to Vladimir Putin revealed the coordinated diplomatic pressure being applied to Russia's remaining allies. But the most sophisticated aspect of this strategy was its sustainability. Unlike military aid, which requires ongoing production and delivery, economic sanctions become more effective over time as they compound and create cascading effects throughout the Russian economy. This approach promised to strangle Putin's regime slowly but inevitably, forcing him to choose between escalation that would unite the West even further or gradual economic collapse that would threaten his political survival. Today, Vladimir Putin faces the impossible choice that his advisors have been dreading for months. The Western response to his invasion has evolved from reactive support for Ukraine into proactive coordination designed to eliminate Russia as a strategic threat permanently. The combination of military aid that neutralizes Russian advantages, economic sanctions that target Putin's key relationships, and financial commitments that guarantee long-term Western engagement has created a strategic trap that Putin cannot escape through conventional means. His options have been reduced to two equally dangerous paths: military escalation against a NATO alliance that has demonstrated superior coordination and resources, or gradual acceptance of defeat that would likely trigger regime change in Moscow. But the most dangerous aspect of Putin's current position is that time is working against him. Every day that passes sees Western coordination improve, Ukrainian defenses strengthen, and Russian resources diminish. The threats of preemptive strikes from Medvedev aren't signs of strength. They're admissions that Putin's regime has run out of conventional options and is now considering desperate measures that could trigger the very NATO response that would guarantee his destruction. What Putin feared most has come to pass. The West has learned to coordinate effectively against him, and that coordination is now systematically dismantling the foundations of his power. The threats emerging from Moscow today don't represent Russian strength. They reveal the systematic dismantling of Putin's strategic position by a Western alliance that has finally learned to coordinate effectively. What began as support for Ukraine has transformed into a comprehensive strategy designed to eliminate Russia as a strategic threat through economic, military, and diplomatic coordination that Putin cannot match or counter. The choice facing Putin now isn't between victory and defeat. It's between gradual collapse and catastrophic escalation, both of which threaten the survival of his regime. But the most significant transformation isn't happening in Moscow. It's happening in the West, where nations have discovered that coordinated action can achieve what individual efforts never could. The question that will define the coming months isn't whether Putin will escalate, but whether the West will maintain the unity that has brought his regime to the brink of collapse.